Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanson and Jim Jonas for another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today we have Amy Ferreira, Las Vegas Justice of the Peace, Department number 8. But before we get to Miss Ferreira, Jim, how you been? Have any rants?
Oh, I don't know how I could have a rant. It was such a slow news week. Nothing happened.
Nothing.
Yeah, but I'm going to, unlike Congressman Raskin, I'm in the House Oversight Committee, I'm going to actually keep it short and to the point.
You know the one that actually got indicted and looking at federal prison time, the one that took bribes, that one?
No.
That's Martinez.
Yeah, he's from New Jersey.
Yeah, Martinez.
Yeah,
There's a lot of news going on this week.
No, Raskin's the ranking member, so he's the leading Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. The only thing about him, and like politicians all do it, I guess, but in his opening statement when they were asking questions of the Secret Service director that resigned, which should have happened the day after, but anyway, in his opening statement, what do you think he was talking about then for his entire opening statement? Gun control legislation.
Right.
That's not exactly what they were there to do. But to be fair to him, when the question period came in, he actually did a fairly good job. But one of the things I wanted to talk about on that is, there's been several candidates that have come on, and I've asked them about what they would do to try to control the deep state, the unelected bureaucrats that are basically running the country. It's all the aides and all that stuff that are actually developing all this legislation. The people that we actually elect aren't. Yeah. So I watched the entire interview because I was bored, had nothing better to do, with the Secret Service director.
Is this your rant?
Yeah. So the rant is, what was really frustrating me about it is, all of a sudden, once that initial statement period was over, and the congressperson asked their question, gone. Next one, gone. Next one, gone. So at one point, all the Congress people were gone except for the chair, because he had to stay. And all their aides were still sitting back against the wall. So they're taking in all this information. So my question to the voters is, hey, they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. They left. Mm-hmm. So who was actually representing us? Their aides that we don't elect. People need to start paying more attention to that and start holding their Congress people and senators accountable. We're paying their salary.
There's a simple solution to that, and it's called term limits. If they put term limits in Congress and term limits in the Senate, we wouldn't have these problems. You see Senator Martinez, who were taking bribes from all these, they said that he was registered as a foreign agent. How are you going to be a United States senator, be a foreign agent? Then he was taking bribes from Saudi Arabia and Egypt. They found gold bullions in his home. They found $500,000 of cash in his house. Really, this is absolutely crazy. He's been a U.S. senator since the 70s. What do you think is going to happen when you're so comfortable in that position? This is what happens. This is called corruption. Corruption happens if you're there too long. And they were there too long. So now he just resigned. He's not going to be a senator anymore. Yeah. Look at Joe Biden. 4 years? Yeah. He's never held a private job ever in his whole entire life. He was the youngest senator back in 72, I think it was. Yeah. And now he's the oldest president. Go figure. They has to be term limits. They has to be term limits. And you can't say you're going to rely on the voters to make that determination, because if I've been a senator for 15, 20 years, I know where to get my money. I know who to talk. Oh, yeah. I know who to call. Sure. That's not fair to a challenger. Absolutely not. It's not fair, because a new a guy that's just trying to be senator is going to come up there. And if you're trying to be senator, you're not going to have all these advantages of somebody that's been in the U.S. Senate for 20 years and 15 years. Please, and tell me, leave it to the voters. No, there has to be term limits. And that's the only way to avoid this corruption. And I've been saying term limits as long as we've been doing the show, going back to 2004, 5. Yeah. And there's still no term limits. I mean, they talk about term limits, but they don't do it. There has to be term limits.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's one of those things where I know it's tough because I'm for term limits. I mean, but it's tough because it's like you're kind of counting on people to actually turn themselves out.
And nobody's going to do
And nobody. Well, there's a few exceptions, but not enough to actually implement the law. That's one of the problems. Until there's enough made of it from us, the voters, that's the only way that's going to change.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm done. My rants. You done? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, cool. Let's talk to Amy. Yeah, you want to talk to her? Okay.
You don't have a choice. I'm here already.
Miss Ferreira. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Ferreira.
Ferreira.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. That's almost like the car, right? What's the car's name?
Yes, but the car is much more exciting, richer, all the good things.
Tell us about yourself.
Yes. So I am running for Las Vegas Justice Court Department 8. I am currently one of your hearing masters in Las Vegas Justice Court.
Okay.
I got appointed in 2020 to that position. And in that role, I do a number of duties that overlap with that of a justice of the peace.
Okay.
Right now, I have a split caseload, so half criminal, half civil. In 2022, I was so honored to be named as Las Vegas Justice Court Employee of the Year.
Wow.
We have hundreds of employees, so it was really...
How many people received that? Do you know?
Usually one per year, sometimes
Congrats.
2 per year.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really such an honor. Prior to my appointment in 2020, I was a prosecutor with the District Attorney's Office.
Uh-oh, scared of you.
I was there for 13 years.
What department?
So I focused my career on some of the most vulnerable members of our community. So I was always a criminal prosecutor.
The seniors.
I was on Special Victims Unit. So I did
children.
Child sexual assault. Okay. All my victims or the majority of my victims were 10 and under. So I had the very little.
Stomach that.
Yeah, it's really difficult. You have to be very good at being able to compartmentalize things. You have to be very good at dealing with stress and emotions and all those things and find a healthy outlet, right? Because it's not easy. Simultaneously, I started the first ever animal cruelty unit at the District Attorney's Office. And so that was a big undertaking. And I was just so happy and so excited when that finally came to fruition. We got a lot of actual national attention for the work that we did. I got 2 national awards from the Animal Legal Defense Fund. They named me one of America's top 10 animal defenders. Again, I'm so humbled by that.
What's your favorite animal?
I don't have a favorite. I love them all so much. I'm bad about favorites. I
really like the chimpanzee.
It sounds like a mom. Oh no, I love all my kids equally. I have no favorites.
No favorites until Christmas time.
Right.
That's why I have one child. She's my favorite human child. Yes, one human child. And then I finished my career at the District Attorney's Office as team chief of the Domestic Violence Unit.
Another one.
So it's been just a blessing to be able to handle cases that I think are so important in our community.
So let me get this straight. You went from child cruelty, to animal cruelty, to domestic violence. You covered the whole gamut practically.
Yeah, people always say...
If you had homicide in there, that would just tie it all in.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. People say I sign up for the jobs no one else wants, which might be true, but I think those are some of the most important jobs we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So what domestic violence, tell me tell me the difference between the misdemeanor domestic violence and the felony domestic violence.
So there are a few different differences. So for example.
And what is domestic violence?
Yeah, so domestic violence, generally speaking, is violence between people who are in an intimate partnership. So husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, and it can also be family members, right? So mom and child, those sorts of relationships. It has changed recently. So it used to be siblings counted as domestic relationships for domestic violence crimes. That has since been removed. Used to be that roommates counted. That has since been removed.
Roommates got removed?
Roommates got removed unless there is a romantic component.
Relationship?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Male, female type as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Any kind of romantic relationship. Okay. Intimate partner violence is generally how we describe it.
Intimate partner violence.
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there are enhancements for the number of times you commit a certain crime, which can take a misdemeanor domestic violence to a felony. So first one, misdemeanor, second one, misdemeanor, third one, felony. We also have versions of domestic violence that are in and of themselves a felony. So if a weapon is used, that's a felony. If there's a strangulation that's involved, that's a felony.
What's the statute on that?
What do you mean?
Strangulation. What's the statute?
The number?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't do numbers. I couldn't tell you.
Is it 2 years or 1 year to file?
Oh, the penalty.
Yes, to file against somebody. If you're accusing somebody of strangulation, How many years do you have before the statute runs out?
I believe it's 3 because that's a felony crime.
Okay.
Sorry, I misunderstood your question originally.
No worries.
But yes. And so different crimes have different statutes of limitations. Civil world is completely different. Homicide, there isn't a statute of limitations. So you see some differences there.
Some people say that's too bad.
Yeah, I'm sure.
He deserved it. Please continue. I'm just being joking.
Listen, sometimes we need some.
That guy's crazy over there, Jim.
Of course, if weapons are involved, right? So if you have with use of a deadly weapon, something that might have been a misdemeanor automatically becomes a felony at that point for domestic violence crimes.
Please continue with your bio.
Yeah. So before I got to Nevada, I was an East Coast girl. So I grew up in Massachusetts, went to law school in New York. And then I saw posting for the district attorney's office in Las Vegas at my law school. And I thought, well, wouldn't that just be so crazy? Like this kind of small town girl going to Las Vegas. So I'm like, let me just apply for it. Just do something crazy. And sure enough, I got a call for an interview.
How long ago was this?
This is in 2006.
Okay.
So the day after I graduated from law school, I got on a plane and came here for my interview. I had never even visited Las Vegas before. It was my first time in Las Vegas. I came in for the interview and I just thought, there's no way I'm going to get it. Like, what do they want with me? I have no ties to this community. And then sure enough, the next day I got the call that I got the job.
What was the DA back then, Roger?
It was David, yeah.
In 2006, yeah.
David Roger, yeah. And funny little story about my interview.
Tell us.
I was in the cab going from the airport to the Regional Justice Center.
No Ubers back then?
No, that was not a thing. And I really didn't know enough about the community. And so I'm asking the cab driver in the car, tell me everything.
So he's like, she's not from around here. I'm going to go a long way.
And I remember asking him, what is the district attorney's name? And he goes, it's David Rogers. And he put an S on it.
Oh, the cab driver knew the
cab driver, but he put the S on it. So I go into the interview and I'm trying to sound, impressive.
Right.
So I try to name drop.
Right.
And so I said Rogers, and it was a panel of like 10 people. And one of them looked up and goes, it's Roger, no S. Yeah. And I thought, the cab driver, he set me up.
He's all by himself.
Yeah. Anyways, I guess they didn't hold it against me because I ended up getting the job. And then I came out here and I started and I thought I'd be here for a year. 1 turned into 2, turned into 5.
What everybody says.
I fell in love with the community and now here we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in being a hearing master? How did that happen?
So a specific opportunity presented itself, which required me to fill out a whole bunch of application, preliminary questions, submit a resume, and then I scored, I guess they score these questionnaires, the minimum requirement to be able to go for an interview. So I went for the interview along with, I don't know, however many other people. And then ultimately the decision was made by taking a vote by the justices of the peace who were presiding at that time. They voted.
This isn't 6.
This is in 2020.
Oh, 2020 now.
For my hearing master spot.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Yeah. Okay.
No, that's okay.
I'm still, she's still coming here. Okay. 2020.
Maybe I need to work on my storytelling.
No, you're good. It's me.
Yeah. So that's how that happens.
Do you enjoy it?
I love it so much.
What have you learned since you've been on the bench that you didn't learn while you was a prosecutor? You went from the prosecutor's office to the bench.
Yes.
So tell me the difference between the two, actually.
Yeah. So the biggest difference, of course, is if you're a prosecutor or if you're a defense attorney, you are representing a certain side. You're not impartial. You're advocating on behalf of one side or the other.
Right.
And so that was the biggest difference. It was having to stay completely neutral, completely unbiased, keeping an open mind, and making a decision and really learning, hey, am I cut out to do this? Am I the kind of person that I would want sitting in this chair if I were a litigant? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think that I am able to do the job properly. I think I have good legal knowledge. I think I have a good disposition in court. And I think an unwavering dedication to justice. I think those are the things that you want in your judicial officers.
So if you're a prosecutor and you found out that the person you're prosecuting is actually innocent, tell me about what would you do?
Done. That has happened to me. Not that I knew the person was actually innocent, but I thought the person may not have done what they were accused of doing.
Okay.
It was an attempt murder case.
That's a huge
It's
thing.
big. And the defense attorney at the time presented me with a document. And this document at least suggested that this person could have been in an alternate location at the time this crime was said to have occurred.
Okay.
This person who was arrested had a record a mile long, tons of violent convictions.
So you're like, this got to be my guy.
Listen, I don't know. It sure didn't look like it from the document that I saw.
Did any of the arrests that he had, or she had, because I don't know what gender, suggest that there was any type of attempted murder in there?
There were violent convictions.
So you were like, tell me.
I could see why somebody investigating this might think that this was the guy.
Okay.
But I would also think, or at least hope, that if whoever was investigating this saw this document that I saw, they might think, ooh, did we get that right? Mm-hmm. And if there's any question in my mind on something like that,
what did you do?
I dismissed it.
So your ego didn't get in the way?
No.
Just drop the charges.
Yeah. I mean,
Good for you.
What can you do?
There's some people that don't do that.
Oh, well, that's...
Their ego gets in the way, and
unfortunate.
I've seen it. So I know.
Yeah.
I don't want to mention any names.
Don't mention any names.
Jim, please.
Okay, so I guess my first question is, obviously as a judge, you're supposed to be impartial, but you're going to try the best you can. But we're all human beings. So one of my questions would be, and I've usually phrased it differently, but I'm gonna, now that I've learned more about it. So as with your experience being in the prosecution, do you think you'll have a difficulty not being a little harder on the prosecution side? Being as though you have so much experience. See, before I always used to say, oh, you're going to favor the prosecution. Now that I've talked to a lot of former people that were prosecuting attorneys, are like, actually, Jim, that's the opposite. I have to fight. Not like, man, if I was trying this case, there's no way I would have brought that up. Like, what are you doing? Where are you going? So how will you avoid doing that? Like second guessing the prosecution, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Not saying you're polling for the prosecution, but just like, okay, they're not following the proper rules in court, or their court decorum isn't the way they should be and properly representing the district attorney's office. How would you deal with that situation?
So I think I already deal with it now because I have a split caseload, and part of my caseload is criminal. So I do a criminal calendar at least once a week. Every Sunday, I'm doing our criminal initial appearance court, and every holiday, yes, including Christmas, I was there, doing our criminal initial appearance calendar. And we have prosecutors making arguments. We have defense attorneys making arguments, most of which are public defenders. And so just because maybe I wouldn't do something a certain way doesn't mean that, this side doing it this way and this side doing it that way is wrong. And generally speaking, I don't really think about how I would have done it. I'm just listening to the arguments from both sides. And so I think also when it comes to prosecution versus defense, if you're a criminal attorney and you're a good criminal attorney, you can see the advantages and disadvantages from both sides. Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily that, just because somebody has been in the DA's office, they're harder on the prosecution. Yeah. You can see the holes on both sides just because you know how it works, you know? So I don't think that would necessarily be an issue for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with we already know what your relationship is with the prosecution office, the attorney's office. What's your relationship with the public defender's office? Because a lot of people get in their mind, oh my God, she's a prosecutor. She came from the prosecutor. She's going to hammer me. What's your relationship?
I mean, I think I have a very good relationship with the public defender's office. At least I'd like to think so. I think that people just automatically think, oh, because those two sides are adversarial, they must not like each other. But by and large, I enjoyed 99% of the other attorneys I worked with. And I think when the opposite side sees somebody who's reasonable, who will listen, who treats them respectfully and, doesn't roll their eyes and doesn't make, snide remarks. And I think those things go a long way. I have had a lot of support from the public defender's office. I have had public defenders ask for yard signs to put at their home. And what a compliment is that, right? I mean, I think that has less to do with, how my rulings go and more to do with my treatment of people. And I think that's important when it comes to our judicial officers. Someone might make a great ruling, but they treat everybody like garbage in their courtroom, and the people leave their courtroom thinking, that was an awful experience. I mean, that's the last thing we want to happen in our judicial system. We don't want people leaving and saying that was a terrible experience. But if you poll however many people in this community who have been to court, they'll probably tell you it wasn't a great experience. And I think there are little things we can do to change that. I mean, we can't change the whole system. I mean, someone's always going to walk out losing, being upset, being unhappy.
Well, yeah, if you rule against me, you're the worst judge ever. That's just the way it goes. Yeah, sorry.
If you rule for me, you're just better than Swiss cheese. So tell me a little bit about your insight as a prosecutor versus your insight as a hearing master.
So it's interesting. Somebody asked me this question the other day related to making decisions on criminal cases. And I said to them, I think it is so important that I had such a good experience at the DA's office, because you have to make quick decisions, especially when it comes to bail, whether someone's going to be released, whether somebody's going to stay in custody. So a lot of things. But the thing that I think sets this apart is this experience, right? There are certain people who will appear before you and you look at their criminal history and they have zeros across the board. Somebody with no criminal history. But you'll read some allegations and the allegations have like every red flag you've ever seen in your entire career.
But it's an allegation.
It's an allegation.
Okay.
And you think to yourself, this is making every hair on the back of my neck stand up. Mm-hmm. In a way that I can't explain. And I'm seeing all these different indicators that something could go very wrong here. And so it's easy to look at a criminal history sheet and say, oh, this person's got a ton of priors or they have no priors.
What are these indicators?
So sometimes we'll see, let me just give you a random example.
Sure.
Sometimes we'll see incidences of people, completely normal functioning individuals, seemingly, who all of a sudden start to exhibit certain things that would suggest that they're experiencing some sort of mental health break or crisis. And there will be things to show a pattern of unraveling, of somebody who is taken some issue that might seem small to the rest of us, and it has taken over their world. And they have started to do things that are very concerning. And I think in those instances, you have to take into account not only someone's criminal history, what family ties they have. Are they employed? Do they have any support in the community? Are they seeking any kind of treatment? Like, what are we doing for this person?
Let me stop you right there, because you said something that's intriguing to me. What does their employment have anything to do with their overlook at them being a criminal or not being a criminal? Tell me.
Sometimes it has to do with a stability factor, right? Like if somebody can hold a job and somebody is showing up, we assume they're showing up on time. If they're retired, that's a different situation. Were you getting concerned for a second there?
Oh, scared.
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway is it's a case-by-case basis, right? You can't treat everybody with a long criminal history the same. You can't treat everybody with no criminal history the same. You got to take into account all the different factors that exist.
Did you complete all the factors that made the hair stand up and back of your head?
There's been so many different examples. I could give you a long laundry list.
Okay.
But I think there are some things that you can't explain to somebody unless they've been a criminal prosecutor or a criminal defense attorney.
Okay.
And those things in the past have suggested certain other things. Okay. And I think that's a skill that can't be taught. That's something from experience. Okay. And I think it's important.
So before we get going too much further, since we're not too far out from Steve's question about your relationship with the public defender's office, I'm really glad Steve brought that question up, because do you see a situation so how would you handle a situation like this? Like, a lot of people really badmouth public defenders. Like, oh, God, I got stuck with a public defender. But one of the things I found out, because I actually became a pretty good friend with a guy who works in the public defender's office, he talked about the caseload being just so overwhelming that a lot of these people in the public defender's office are actually really good attorneys, to be honest with you. But they just don't have the time. So, for instance, if you just kind of got in not trying to play favoritism towards the public defender, obviously, but could you see a situation where obviously the public defender just doesn't want to do this, and they're just and so they're just trying to move things along as quickly as possible, and they're not truly representing the person they're assigned to represent.
Could I see a scenario where that could happen? Maybe.
What would you do in that situation? Because I've asked this question with judges before. Like, would you actually call them to the bench, have them approach the bench and be like, I know you're busy, but 5 minutes out of your day, like, I think you need to look at this case a little further.
Yeah. I mean, the way my mind works, and I'm not saying this is how everybody's mind works,
Right.
But if there's something that's making me question somebody's ability, my first question is something else going on?
Yeah.
Is there a substance abuse issue happening? Is there some sort of emotional turmoil going on?
Yeah.
Does this person need help? Do I need to contact somebody on their behalf? Are they struggling with something? And it's manifesting in this way, but nobody else realizes what they're struggling with. And I think we have things in place for that. We have lawyers helping lawyers.
Right.
We have different boards of judicial ethics. We have places to report to. We have the state bar, all those different things. And so I wouldn't necessarily assume that it's because they're disinterested or they don't have time or something of that nature. I'd want to ask a whole lot more questions.
Yeah. Or just maybe then in that situation, just basically not have them approach the bench, but just later maybe give that information to the boss. Like, look, on this case number, this was the public defender that was assigned to it. And this is what I observed.
I think reporting is so important, even if there's nothing to report. Better safe than sorry.
And then I apologize for this. So you're running for JP or district court judge?
Justice of the peace.
Justice of the peace. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then just one other quick question. Then I'll turn it back over to Steve on this point. So I actually feel bad now. I actually probably owe this guy an apology. He was one of our panel members years ago, and he was talking about writing JP's writing opinions and what impact that would have on. I said, well, first off, JPs don't write opinions. I was kind of mocking him actually. And I shouldn't have done that. In private, though, not in front of everybody. I didn't do it. So anyway, but we had someone running for family court judge last week, and I was talking to her after the show. She said one of the issues that she's found with judges is not documenting your case properly, like being as in depth as you're supposed to be in the documentation process. Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the key to actually making sure the case is actually documented from your standpoint correctly enough? So if this happens to occur in another court, they know exactly like, this is, okay, I can understand why this judge ruled this way.
Mm-hmm. Great question. So there's kind of two things. Number one are court minutes. So there is somebody who will type in what happened in court. It's the court clerk. We also, of course, have a court reporter or court recorder that takes down a transcription of everything that occurs. So I think making sure court minutes are very clear is very important. So when I'm in court and I'm sitting as a hearing master, I will make my ruling and explain everything. And then at the very end, I will sort of recap it in 3 sentences to make sure my clerk can get those points as to why I ruled the way that I did. For example, small claims cases. So when I first started as a hearing master, I did small claims many days a week. And every time we did a small claims case, we were to write a findings of fact and conclusions of law that would set out the basic facts of the case, how we were ruling, why we were ruling, and what the judgment was. And so I think being a very good and clear writer and a very good and clear thinker will really help somebody if that case goes up on appeal or if that case goes to a different court. So that exactly what you're saying. Somebody understands, yeah, okay, I know why she did this, or I know what she did, but why? What was the background to it? So I think that that is really important. And I think it just comes down to making sure you're able to sort of explain your reasoning and that that explanation gets documented appropriately.
Mental illness.
Yeah.
What do you look for?
I mean, it depends. I'm certainly not anybody who has any, specialized training in that. I can certainly see instances of people in court. I can sometimes see before somebody starts talking that there's an issue for, a myriad of reasons. And so I think that a lot of our court system is tied to mental illness, substance abuse, homelessness. And so I think that the more we tackle those things, the better our court system will be, because we won't be trying to handle something criminally that should be handled by a doctor, by a medication, by a therapist. And so I think they're so closely connected, particularly in our community. You'll see just really a lack of resources a lot of times, I think. And I think we have a lot of people and organizations doing their best to try to fill that gap. But it's just not filled as of.
Don't you guys have grant writers in the court system
I
that
believe so,
writes
yeah.
grants, especially get funded for these
Specialty courts, yeah.
And what's your favorite specialty court if you have one, or would you want to add another specialty court to the ones that already exist, and why?
So I don't really have favorites. I think I said that earlier, like favorite. I don't have favorites. I think they're all.
She doesn't have favorites. Equal opportunity.
I don't have favorites. Yeah, I think they're all important in their own right. Like we have our Veterans Court, which obviously is a great program.
That's one of my favorites.
Well, I'm not surprised.
I helped testify and write the bill on the Veterans Court
it's great.
back in 8.
It's a great program.
And I told Jim Gibbons, I'm like, sign that bill, Jim. When he was governor at the time, sign the bill. Jim, sign the bill.
Yeah, it's important to take care of people that have taken care of us, Certainly we have our substance abuse courts. We have our community court for those people who are sort of facing homelessness and committing the types of crimes you might see associated. Petty larcenies, the obstructive use of a public sidewalk, the trespass, those types of crimes.
Public urination.
All of them. Yeah, all of those. We call them the unhoused type crimes. Generally speaking, they're not violent. Sometimes they are. I mean, sometimes you have those types of individuals who end up committing a violent crime. By and large, they're those, more minor offenses. And of course, we have our less traditional specialty courts, domestic violence court, DUI court. And so we have a lot of judges who have really kind of dedicated themselves to gaining some specialized experience and some specialized knowledge in these particular areas. So I think they're all really important.
I am one of my pet peeves for the judiciary is judicial temperament.
Yeah.
And I talk about judicial temperament all the time. And some people look at me, judicial temperament. But it's very important. I mean, we got a judge right now that just popped up in the paper about judicial temperament. How important is judicial temperament?
It's completely important. It's 100% important.
Or tell us about it.
Yes. It's like that expression. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? So if you have a person who is sitting as a judicial officer and that person appears to be condescending, impatient, not wanting to listen, speaks to somebody in a manner that they find disrespectful, that litigant will never feel like they got a fair shot, ever. Whether they got the fair shot or not, they are going to leave thinking the system was rigged against them. They have no faith in our judicial system. And
they probably won't even vote.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
And to me, how sad is that? I mean, I'll tell you a very just quick story. I had a case, it was a small claims case. So we're going back a couple years. And one of the other justices of the peace came to my office and she said, my friend appeared in front of you. And I said, oh, really? And she's like, yeah, he said you were so nice and you did such a good job. And I go, oh, who was it? And then she told me his name and I go, I ruled against him. And she goes, yeah, no, he told me. And I was like, that to me is such a compliment. That person, it didn't go his way, but he felt seen, he felt heard, he felt like I looked at all the evidence, I considered it carefully, and I made a decision, and I can't ask for more than that.
You know what's also important to litigants is when, because I know there's some judges that do this, is when they explain why they arrived at their decision.
Yes.
Whether it's in favor of you or against you, as long as you explain it, by the time you leave the courtroom, you're like, man, I can't appeal that.
Yes.
But how important it is to explain to the litigant why you ruled the way you did.
It's very important, particularly with litigants who are unrepresented by counsel. So you're dealing with people who maybe it's their first time in the court system. They're scared. They don't know what they're doing. They have nobody to help them. And so when that type of a litigant is in front of you, it is your job as the judge to make sure they understand what's happening. If they leave the courtroom and they're like, I don't know what just happened, there's a real problem. And so you maybe speak a little more slowly. You maybe explain things a little more significantly when you have somebody who's unrepresented by counsel. Sometimes you'll have one party is represented by counsel and the other party is not. And so you'll do a lot of explaining that you wouldn't normally do if both sides were represented by counsel. But I think when somebody understands why you're making the decision that you're making, they respect it in a way that they don't if they're like, oh, well, she just made this decision or he just made this decision, and they don't know why. They think it's a willy-nilly, like, someone just picked a number out of a hat.
So my next question for you then is, so how do you feel? It's more of a legislative issue. I'm just more your opinion on this. So one of the things that I find kind of frustrating, I just don't. I think it's just crossing the boundaries of equal co-branches of government. As far as all these minimum sentencing, maximum sentencing, NRS statutes. And one of the ones that's particularly impactful, I think, specifically in Las Vegas, is DUIs. And we know DUIs are enhanceable crimes. So the first one's a misdemeanor, second one's a misdemeanor, third one's a felony. So will you see DUI cases, or will it just, okay.
I do.
Oh, well, I know as a JP you would, but I didn't know if you just funnel them all the way to the DUI court or not.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about, like, the first offense is so much, second so much, and then it's not till the third offense that it's an actual felony, and it's set within a 7-year span, correct? So, but if, say, somebody can stretch it out to where they don't get that third one until it's outside 7 years. Because sometimes you hear about these people that have had 5, 6, 7 DUIs, and you're like, how was it never a felony? Well, the 3 were never within the 7 years. And then I've also come across individuals that will get arrested and taken to CCSD. And then the next time they get a DUI, they go to Las Vegas jail. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, those two don't talk. The DMVs always seem to match up on the civil side, but the courts, for whatever, aren't tracking that. What's your opinion as far as minimum and maximum sentencing? And would you like to see the legislature maybe get a little more aggressive on DUIs as far as, no, the third one, and maybe extend the statutes of limitations a little past 7 years?
Yeah, so
especially in this area, because it's a real issue and it's an urban area. We're not in the middle of Wyoming or something, right?
Yeah. So I'll start with my disclaimer. Okay. I follow the laws it's written in every case that comes in front of me. Yeah. Do I think that there is room to consider changes to particular statutes, in particular, driving under the influence? I do. And here's kind of why. When you think about this concept, somebody who's driving under the influence and crashes their car into another car, but the driver of that other car, by the grace of some higher power, is uninjured. That's a misdemeanor. If that same person drives that same car and hits a car carrying a passenger, and that passenger ends up with substantial bodily harm, that's a felony. The act is exactly the same. Nobody has control over the outcome of a DUI case. If you hit another car, what are you kind of relying on for substantial bodily harm? How old is the person in the car? What physical condition are they in? Is there a child in the car?
Right.
And so the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony sometimes is not very much. And so I think there's room to consider that. I also think there's room to consider whether somebody should get 3 chances before something ends up as a felony.
Right.
I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't, but I think there's room for a conversation. And I think that we have seen in our community, especially lately, the horrific impact that DUIs have. And it's like, as soon as you finish reading one newspaper article, you seem to read another. And the problem doesn't necessarily seem to be improving. Right. And so I think there's a lot of room for us to make some changes in a lot of different ways, not just the legal system, that can really protect our community. And what's our job in the judicial system, right, is to make sure we are protecting those members of our community. I mean, the person sitting in the chair sometimes is the only person who can protect the community because they control whether someone's walking around in it or they're not.
Yeah, because see, one of the things that and I'll leave it, I don't want to take up too much time, but and give them my opinion. But one of the things that I would like to see, because I know like in different panels and stuff we've done, there's always somebody in the back that goes, drop the hammer. When are you going to drop the hammer? So that's why I wanted to hear more from a judge, the actual language. Then also, what about maybe instead of waiting for the third, we don't wait for them to get a felony. How about on the second enhancement, or even if there's a family history, like even on the second enhancement, like, hey, you're going to have to go to the, what do they call that, residual, where you just can tell that this person is probably more apt to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. So then they got to go to drug court. Or it will be escalated from there. Mm-hmm. That's where I got a friend that's in the Nevada legislature. I'm going to actually bring that up to him.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your opinion as a judge, what you thought about it. And since, thankfully, you have experience in the legal system here with being a hearing master and a former prosecutor. So I just wanted to get your take on it.
It's scary. I mean, all you have to do is be driving. Right?
Yeah, because I just think, I just think the legislature is starting to get a little too either heavy-handed or lax in this minimum maximum sentencing. I'm like, why do we elect judges in the state then if the legislature is basically going to tell them these are the parameters?
Yeah, it's an interesting point for sure.
As a justice of the peace, you get to lock people up.
Yeah.
And how long do you get to lock them up for? 6 months?
Yes. So we deal primarily with misdemeanors when it comes to sentencing. I mean, I should say we deal only with misdemeanors when it comes to sentencing. We see all different kinds of cases, including felonies, but we don't see them at the sentencing timeframe.
As a hearing master, have you ever locked somebody up?
Well, I make bail decisions, right? So I don't sentence people.
You don't sentence.
I mean, I guess on traffic I have. I've never sent someone to jail on a traffic ticket. And now most of the tickets,
anymore, right?
They've mostly become civil now anyways. But back when they were criminal, I never sent anybody to jail on a traffic ticket. But the ability to keep somebody in custody, I absolutely have as a hearing master.
So as a justice of the peace, you're going to have that ability.
That same power, yep.
And have you had an opportunity to visit the Clark County Detention Center?
Oh, yes.
And what do you think of the establishment?
I think it's somewhere I hope to never make an overnight stay. I think it was lovely.
No Airbnb for her.
Right.
I think it was lovely to visit, and I think it was so crucial for me to visit. I visited before my first day as a prosecutor. So before I even handled my first case, I went there. I went to a bunch of the prisons that are up more north. I did a whole bunch of tours of our local facilities. And I think that's important because if you're sending somebody to a certain place, you should know kind of where are you sending them? What does it look like? What's happening
so
there?
You can kind of make sure that the crime does fit the punishment or vice versa, but however you say that.
I mean, yeah, in a certain way. I mean, do I think every judge needs to go visit every, holding detention center? No, I don't. But I think, somebody who cares enough to go and see and have that knowledge that tells you something about them.
Well, I want to congratulate you on receiving the joint veterans endorsement.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And is there anything that you like to say that you haven't said that we left out?
Yes, I would first like to say thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and to have the opportunity to speak to you and everybody who might be watching or listening.
So far you got about 50 people.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's 50 votes. No.
There'll be a lot more by the time November comes around. That's for sure.
I think so. I think it's really important for people to kind of get to know the people who want to sit as judges. I think people are on the bench who they are off the bench. And so this kind of a dynamic where you're kind of chatting with somebody, seeing how they think about things, can tell you a lot about how they are on the bench. I think if you see somebody who's kind and pleasant and thoughtful and patient, that's one thing. You see somebody with a great big ego who, talks about themselves and they don't want to listen. That's a different dynamic. Yeah. And so people get to decide what's best for them. At the end of the day, I hope people decide it's me. I think I'm a regular member of our community. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I have a little farm of rescue animals. And so I tell you that because I think it shows you where my head's at, where my heart's at. And I'm just so excited at the opportunity of further serving the community.
Jimmy, you have anything else for Ms. Ferreira?
No, actually, I just wish you luck on your race.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And I appreciate you coming in the afternoon. our lovely weather out here. It's a little muggy and just a little warm. So I appreciate you coming by and answering some more questions.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Ms. Ferreira, please take a look at the camera. Mark is
Yes.
going to zoom in on you.
All right.
And you tell folks why they should go to the voting booth and vote for you to be the next Justice of the Peace for Department 8. Department 8.
Yes.
Okay.
So I am very humbly requesting your vote. I think I am most certainly the best person for the job. I think I have the proper experience, the judicial knowledge, the judicial temperament, and unwavering dedication to justice. I want to make sure Las Vegas remains a safe and beautiful place for us to raise our families. I very strongly believe in community safety. I believe in our Constitution. I believe in the rights of the people who live here. And I'm just so excited to further serve.
Point of contact.
Point of contact. So that people can get
Your website,
I was
email.
Yeah.
That sounded like one word. I'm like, what's a point of contact?
It's the Jamaican in me.
Right.
My point of contact. So I have my website. If you go to Ferreira for Judge, and it has all my contact information. So my phone number that you can call me at, my email address, and certainly on social media. I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram. And so I love to connect with voters, and I hope that I can do that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Folks, that's Amy Ferreira. She is the Las Vegas Justice of the Peace Department 8 candidate, and she's also endorsed by the Joint Veterans. That includes Nevada Veterans Association, the Nevada Democratic Veterans and Military Family Caucus, Armed Forces Chamber PAC, and Veterans in Politics International. We encourage everybody to vote for Amy Ferreira for the next Justice of the Peace for Department 8. If you live in Henderson or Boulder City or any one of those surrounding areas and you know somebody living in Las Vegas and you see this program, give them a call and say, hey, vote for Amy Ferreira. And I also want to point out that on Saturday, we are going to be conducting the judicial interviews for Clark County District Court Judge Department 14, Department 27, and Las Vegas Justice of the Peace Department 4. So please tune in. It's going to start at 10 a.m., which will be the 1st, 11, and at noon. Please tune in. That way you could be educated on the candidates running for these seats. And folks, these seats were brought in after the primary election was over. So they're going to go all the way to the general. So that's why these seats are up on the ballot as well. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jonas of Veterans in Politics. Until next time.